it's Heath here from pickinglessons.com. You Are My Sunshine is such a beautiful melody, and in this guitar lesson we're going to take a look at a cross-picking arrangement here on the 6th string. In a moment we're going to take a look at the first 8 measures of the first variation, but if you head over to pickinglessons.com you will be able to get yourself a copy of the tablature and the chart we're working from. There are 2 variations in total. We'll also continue on this lesson, break down the second half of the first variation, and then also look at the second variation completely as well. pickinglessons.com. Okay, let's start out with this first half, the first 8 measures of the first variation. We're down the neck here, a lot of cross picking, so we're going to break that down as we go, but here's a slow playthrough for you first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay, so first 8 measures there. Looking at the chords we're working around initially, we're in the key of G, and we have a lot of this open G chord to start with. There's a C shape in there, and then back to the G position. Something to keep in mind with this type of style and technique is we want the notes to ring for as long as we can. So even though we might not be continuing to play that low G consistently, we want it to ring out after we do play it. So we want to hold our hand position there. Same for the C chord once we get there. So something to keep in mind for your left hand is really maintain chord positions and as long as you can, for as long as we can until we need to move on to another chord or adjust the fingering for a melody, for example. Pick up notes very quickly. We'll count this in 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, 4 time. Those 3 pickup notes there beats 2, 3, and 4. Now, leading us into the first measure, we're running into this first cross-picking passage. We can probably string these together. We'll break each one down initially. That first measure there, holding our G chord, make sure string 5 is muted out. Just the underneath of that 3rd finger there will do the job. So we're not going to hear string 5. And we just brush across all the way down to our 2nd string. That becomes the melody. That's our melody note we want to hear there. Then we're going to run into some cross picking. Now, the way that a lot of people approach cross picking, myself included, is that we'll alternate following the rhythm, following the 8th notes. So for example, after the brush, down, up, down, up, down, up, following the 8th note rhythm and that pulse that we have. So down on the beat and up off the beat. There are a couple of other ways you could approach this. For example, after the brush, down, up, down, down, up, up. So more of a sweep style picking. I'll let you decide, but I'm going to continue on explaining as we go with the more of the alternating picking during the cross picking moments. I think it just helps for consistency, but feel free to experiment yourself. You do need to decide for yourself, but we are going to alternate as we go through here. So one more time, after the brush, down, up, down, up, down, up, following the pulse, letting all those notes ring out really clear. Second measure. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and still holding that low G there all the way through. Let's string measures 1 and 2 together. Ready, and 1. So there you can see that the right hand that I'm using there, I'm just following that pulse as I go. I think it makes for a really steady way of following the rhythm and keeping in the pulse, but of course there are other ways. Sometimes tempo can change the way we approach things as well. Now this one is quite slow, it's a beautiful melody, we don't want to rush it too much anyway. So the cross picking there with the alternating technique attached. We'll string some more of these measures together. Let's look at measure 3. So we're still in our G position. Measure 3. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and down, down, up, down, up, down, up. Continuing that theme. Let's play this fourth measure, then we'll run all four together. Fourth measure, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, with that hammer on. Once you play that hammer onto that A, you can let go of that one. That's just sort of more a passing note. It's really important to hold the chord, but that passing note, not so much. Notice those notes ringing out. Let's play these four measures. I'll use the pickup as well. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Brush. There we go. Can you hear the melody in there? It's pretty strong. And just letting that right hand pick back and forth following that groove of the rhythm. It works really well once you get into the swing of how that works. Remembering to hold that left hand in position and work around the G chord and make sure the fifth string is blocked as you brush. Next up, we have a C chord change. Now, our melody's moving around the C position, and initially we brush across the C chord just to the first string. That will capture our melody. Then we have some cross picking without having to change or alter the left hand at all. So there's our first measure of C, second measure of C. This one's a little trickier because we've got some extra melody notes. So let's have a look at how we'll do that with the left hand. The left hand first, still holding C shape. Then that little finger comes in for that D note. Then off again for the C. First finger lifts away for the open B. Second finger out of position into the second fret there for that pull off. So starting with the chord initially, but then adjusting the little finger, first finger, second finger as needed. So the two measures of C end up sounding like this. Ready, and. Now, make sure you're really steady with your rhythm. Watch those quarter notes into the eighth notes. The rhythm is structured in two voices, so our lower notes will ring on a little longer sometimes than the upper notes for the melody, the upper voice. Now, again, just a reminder, hold chord positions as long as you can and keep your picking steady. Something that I find that works really well as we're cross picking now, we've had a play through these first half a dozen bars. I'm always anchoring myself there underneath the strings. Sometimes if I'm not playing string one, I'll even come up on string one there just to anchor the hand, but if I'm needing string one, like in this C passage, we'll get out of the way there. Now it's not firm, the anchor, so it's not really tight on the soundboard, it's just loose, and it actually moves around a little bit, adjusting what we need as we play, but it just helps with the guide there. So you don't have to anchor, you could float, so you could float your hand over the top. That would be a little harder, but it would be just as effective. I certainly wouldn't bring the hand down onto the bridge or work from below string 6, that won't work. So either a floating technique, which is probably more difficult, or the really common way of just anchoring your finger there, so little finger or two fingers, whatever's comfortable. And don't lock it in hard, just let it sort of shift as you need to shift as well. That certainly can help. Let's finish this off though. Two measures of a G, first measure, so measure 7. Back into that G position. We don't start with it though, because we've come out of C, we've just got melody, and then low G. Holding that low G position as we venture into measure 8. Change though to the B note from the G chord. And then holding on to that B as we finish off that measure. That's a nice passing note leading us into the following chord, which we'll look at a little bit later. So out of that G measure, on measure 7, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, passing note. Next up, next portion of the melody will change to a different chord there, leading us in. Now, notice that again, all those notes are ringing out. Let that sustain really venture through the entire tune. The right hand again, down up following the 8th notes and down on the pulse, works really well for cross picking, but you can experiment in more of a sweep style where you just sort of pick in the direction you need to play. That works as well. It's kind of down to the individual player, but certainly a lot of people do favor one over the other, and personally I prefer the alternating version of a cross-picking technique. You'll find in the tablature that you've got your left hand and your right hand marks in there, so the pick marking all the way through is there for the alternating picking, and your left hand finger positions are there as well, so you can use those just to guide you through to make sure you're in the right position as you're practicing along. Okay, take your time. Very pretty tune. I think it works really well in this cross-picking style on the guitar. It's a little bit different to say finger style, but it works really nicely. It could be used as a break over the top of other instruments, or it could be used as a solo guitar version as well. I think it's really pretty like that. If you head to pickinglessons.com, we will continue on this lesson. We're going to break down the second half of this first variation, another 8 measures there. Then we'll look at the second variation where we do head up the neck and we're approaching it in a slightly different way, sort of harmonizing against the melody at times as well. Really pretty. A little bit of floating technique in there as well. All these techniques complement each other really well. Okay, so pickinglessons.com, I'll see you there.